Hey, what's up? Thanks for joining me in this training. Very excited to be here and share my top 10 tips for award-winning hair. My name is Richard Kavanagh and I am a hairdresser. Do you ever get that nervous kind of feeling when you're asked to style hair? Maybe you worry that it's not going to work out, or you won't know how to fix things if they start going sideways or collapsing, or maybe it's about managing expectations and knowing what's possible and what's not and why. Or perhaps you wonder why hair never looks the same on camera as it does in the chair, or why it is that some people have or seem to have the formula for award-winning images, even though you feel like your work is technically just as good as theirs. Look, I feel you. I've had all those feelings and more throughout my career. I've had times where I felt like I just had no idea what I was doing. I was sweating it on shoots. But eventually, over time, I've built up enough experiences to know that I have a solution for pretty much whatever is thrown at me on a job in most different situations. So what I wanted to do with this training is to share with you my top 10 learnings. So you'll hopefully be able to avoid some of the mistakes that I made early in my career, even later in my career, by learning from my experiences so that you can feel more confident styling hair, whether it's on set, on location, or behind the chair for your clients. Can I get you to do me a real quick favor? If you can drop an H in the comments if you're primarily a hairdresser, an M if you're mainly a makeup artist, or an O if you do something else with your time like a photographer, stylist, creative director, etc. That's an H for hairdresser, M for makeup artist, or O for other. If you can just drop that in the comments for me real quick. Awesome, thank you for that. You know, back in the day, I had this one client that would end up having a really big impact on my career without me being aware of it until much later. It was when I was just kind of starting out, and I've been maybe hairdressing for like, I suppose, 6 or 7 years. I was working in this small suburban salon in a suburb called Devonport in Auckland, New Zealand. And this client comes into the salon, and she was one of those people who kind of carries themselves small. You know what I mean? Like, have you ever seen someone who kind of moves through the world with like almost like an apologetic stance, like they're apologizing for their existence in a way through the way they carry themselves? Now, her hair was kind of coarse. It was wavy, not curly. It didn't kind of have a great shape in it. It wasn't super dense. And basically it was just the hair type that didn't sit well naturally. It wasn't easy hair, if you know what I mean. Additionally, she was a little bit overweight, and she had a big port wine birthmark on her face that she covered up. She actually gelled her hair down onto her face to cover up the birthmark. And while I was doing the consultation, I noticed that every time I would take her head and turn her head to the mirror so I could see her face shape, and she'd catch sight of herself, she'd like avert her eyes like that very quickly. She couldn't handle looking at herself in the mirror. But what I did notice was that her eyes were actually her best feature. They were amazing, bright blue, crystal clear, almond-shaped eyes. So, of course, I wanted to bring attention to her best features, add a flattering shape to her jaw. And so I gave her this little kind of short bob with a heavy fringe, and I did a little bit of shaping around the face so that she could feel comfortable with the hair kind of cuddling her face and I guess it obscuring the birthmark without her having to gel or slick it down. And back in the day, we had a choice basically of mousse, gel and hairspray. So I grabbed some mousse, put it through the hair, got my Denman, blow dried her hair nice and smooth, made it look super sleek and cool. And when I was done, I just dusted off the loose hair, whipped off the cape, and held up the back mirror to show her the shape, like all the while totally normal service offering. Now, she looked up for the first time since the consultation. I assumed that she was just checking that I hadn't ruined her hair. And as she kind of caught sight of herself in the mirror, she paused for a moment and she held her own gaze, and her spine started to straighten. And a little smile came over her face. And she kind of got up out of the chair. She had a kick in her stride, a little sparkle in her vibe. And it was like she kind of floated over to the reception desk to pay. And she walked out with her head held high. Now, since then, in fact, for the past 2.5 decades, I've worked in the fashion industry as a freelance session stylist. So that means I do hair for photo shoots, fashion shows, celebrities, red carpet and events, etc. And my work has taken me around the world to work backstage at Fashion Week in New York, Milan, Paris, and to be part of the team that works on shows like Prada, Versace, Calvin Klein, Marc Jacobs, Saint Laurent, McQueen, and literally hundreds more. And I've personally created hairstyles for the covers and pages of titles such as Vogue and Bazaar, Elle, InStyle, Vanity Fair. And despite the many, I suppose you could call them pinch me moments that I've had over the years in my career, it's that moment in Devonport with that woman that is why I do what I do, and why I'm just so jazzed up on how much of an impact simply styling someone's hair can have, not just on them themselves, but on the world. Because think about how she would have been showing up for the rest of the day out there in the world. Everyone she interacted with would have at least some subtle level been impacted by her good vibes and how she felt about herself. And the magic is that we get to do that for everyone that we work with. So here it is, my top 10 secrets for creating award-winning hair. Secret number 1 is why hair looks different on camera. Now, different light affects the way hair looks, especially on camera. And I like to kind of frame it like this. There are 4 main types of light that change the way we do hair. Hard light puts a high shine on the hair, and often things like heat styling products and hairsprays tend to read patchy or blotchy in hard light. So you want to go easy with product. You want to focus on getting the hair mechanically and technically sound, closing the cuticle with heat and tension with your bristle brush and your hot tools so that it's really reflective. And before you start adding product, you want to make sure you get on set and do a light test to see how the hair is reading. And if you want to create texture in the hair when you're working with hard light, and I don't mean curl, I mean texture, try ruffling the hair up with your hands first before you start adding product, and do a bit of a light test with the photographer, because sometimes just the way the shadows and light read on camera with hard light can have the same effect as texturizing products. And like I said, products can read extra heavy or uneven and patchy in hard light. So as you start adding product, just do it a little bit at a time until you get to the desired result. Backlight tends to make the overall shape look much smaller, and so when the light wraps around the subject from behind, it can also make flyaways appear more prominent, especially if there's a hard backlight on the hair from above and behind, like shining from back there. You might see flyaways on camera or on the monitor screen, and then you go to the model and you have a look and you can't see them with your naked eyes on set. If this happens and you're on a shoot, you can see the flyaways on screen and you're asked to fix them or tame them, or you want to tame them yourself, you'll be able to understand that it's the light, and you'll be able to find a diplomatic way to explain that it's how the light is hitting the hair rather than actually being the hair having flyaways itself. Soft light is the most forgiving for hair. You find that the hair texture and the shape on camera looks pretty much like it does to your natural eye in the chair. Although, depending on the camera settings that the photographer uses, sometimes hair colors can look radically different. And if you're trying to get maximum shine and reflection on the hair, soft light is not really going to do it for you. Unlike hard light, you can get away with using loads of texture products to control frizz or add grit and pieciness. If you're shooting curls and you want it to look natural, soft light is going to be your best friend. Curls often shoot really well in soft light, and they look way less frizzy on camera because of the lighting, which is lovely. Now, to make curls look really natural and not overly dressed when you're working with soft light, get your hands into the hair and give it a good shake and break up the curls. You can even get your model to throw their head upside down and get their hands into it to break it up. It'll make it look and feel a lot more natural. Side light, sometimes called window or Rembrandt light, often creates shadows on one side of the face. So you might want to do a light test before you get too deep into the hair and deciding which side you should part the hair on, because it's way easier to change the hair from one side to the other than it is to arrange all the lights again once they're set up, if you know what I mean. And while we're talking about light, let's share a few hot tips for when you're taking pictures of your hair work for social media. Probably the most important thing that I ever learned was from Guido, because he always used to say, look at the face, look at the girl, look in the mirror, look at the face, because it's all about the person. And what he means by that is, rather than focusing too much on the little details of the hair, focus on their face and make the hair flattering to the individual, because that will make your shots more engaging. My personal opinion, we don't need to see the back of the head. It's not as engaging as a person's face. We want to see the person, because If you do great hair, it will make the person look and feel their best regardless of whether it's technically good or not, and that will come across on camera. When it comes to lighting, sublit or lit from below is when you have too much bounce or fill below the subject, and it can make them look kind of spooky. And top lit or lit from above can cause unflattering shadows on the face. So if you're taking pics indoors, you need to pay extra attention because A, most lights are in the ceiling, and B, because of this, our eyes become accustomed to downlighting. We almost don't see the bad shadows that they create. So you kind of need to find a way to reset your eyes and reset your brain so that you're looking for that magic good light. Now, speaking of that good light, front lit is the most flattering for beauty pics. So you can use a ring light if you need to, but my favorite is actually soft, natural window light. And when you're using the window light, what you want to do is move your subject slowly closer and further away from the window while you're looking at the light on their face until you find that perfect spot where they look their most flattering. Secret number two ways to create a wet look. Look, how do you create a wet look? This is a question I get asked a lot, and different people have different ways of approaching it, such as wetting the hair with water, or I don't know if you've heard this one, but using lube. Personally, I feel that hair product is a better choice, more out of respect for the client or the model, because you never know. Some people might find it fun or cute that you're using lube, but others could potentially be put off. Also, some of those personal products are water-based or they might be oil-based and you don't really know what the ingredients are, so it'll be hard to tell exactly how different ones are going to affect the hair. So for me, I say better safe than sorry and just stick to actual hair products. So here are my two tried and tested methods that I've learned and developed from shooting magazine covers, shampoo ads, and backstage at Fashion Week in New York, Milan, and Paris. The first one is you use oil. Oil is awesome if you're working with fine or fragile hair because it's moisturizing. It makes the hair easy to comb into cool shapes and it stays flexible, which means you can change up the shape throughout the day. And for some reason, I don't know how the science works here, it doesn't seem to weigh fine hair down and allows it to look lush and healthy, but somehow it also softens and reduces volume if the hair is thick and coarse. Now, the downside of working with oil for a wet look is that you need lots of product to saturate the hair, which can get a little bit expensive and maybe a little bit messy. And you need to keep working the shape throughout the shoot if you're shooting, because the hair will move as the talent moves, because it doesn't set hard. And if you're working with expensive garments, you won't want to be responsible if you get oil on the delicate fabric. The other way that I like to do to create a wet look is to use a stronghold high shine styling mousse. You put the mousse all the way through dry hair from roots to ends, completely saturated until the hair is really, really wet with product, and you leave it to set into shape. Now, the mousse you want to choose is one with a high acrylate base as opposed to a softer moisturizing mousse. And these are normally like root lifting or volumizing mousses. And the way that you can tell is that it'll be a mousse that tends to go crunchy when it's dry, as opposed to the moisturizing mousses, which dry more flexible. They feel a bit more oily in the hair to your hand. Now, you also need to have enough time for the hair to dry into shape before shooting or walking in the show. And depending on how much hair the talent has and the weather conditions, like if they've got loads of hair, it could take an hour or more to set fully. Like obviously if they've got less hair, it's much faster. Now, the advantage with this approach is that the hair won't move once it's set, and although it looks like it's wet, it'll actually be dry to the touch, so there'll be no issues with delicate fabrics getting damaged from the product. But with either method, what you want to be aware of is that once you go in for a wet look, that's pretty much it until your talent can wash their hair. So if you're in a situation where you're doing multiple looks on the same person, you might want to find a way to leave the wet looks for last, or you're going to be stitched up. Now, you might ask, why not just use water? Well, you can, and for some shoots, particularly like swimwear campaigns or, where the model has to be in the water, I have used water, but the problem with water is that it can be hard to control the hair, and sometimes it reads like a little bit dull or sort of flat looking on camera. And I don't mean flat as in volume, I mean flat as in reflection. If the hair obviously has any tendency for frizziness, then the water is not going to be your friend at all. And it dries quickly. So even if you're in the pool or in the ocean, you have to keep wetting the hair to make it look good. And I find that it just tends to get a bit tangly and hard to control just using water. Secret number 3. This is how the camera sees hair. Now, when it comes to hair, the camera sees three things. It sees the silhouette, the perimeter, and the texture. Now, the silhouette is the outside line of the hair. The silhouette will change as the model and the photographer move and change angles. So what I like to do is use this little hand telescope technique to see the silhouette in 2D like the camera does. So what you do is you shut one eye, you make a telescope out of your hand, and then you move around the talent to check the perimeter and how the camera will see it. And sure, you might look like a dick, but at least you know the hair is going to look good. When it comes to hair, a simple rule of thumb is that the bigger the silhouette, the more glam, and the smaller or narrower the silhouette, the more cool or street vibe. Now, that's obviously not a hard and fast rule because there's lots of other factors, but it's a good thing to keep in mind when you're styling hair if something's not quite feeling right. Silhouette can also play a big role in referencing a certain era. For example, if you think of 60s hair, the silhouette's often a little bit egg-shaped, with height at the crown and sitting a little bit closer at the front of the head when you look at the profile. Now, the perimeter is the edge where the hair meets the face or the skin, and it includes the partings and the fringe. And the perimeter is what has the biggest impact on how flattering the hair is on the person and how much it suits their face. To give you an example, I'll use my hands and just moving the perimeter forward and back, or just a smaller amount, like literally just half an inch or so, like that much, can dramatically change the shape of a person's face because the camera will end up seeing more or less face or cheekbones. And pushing the hair back behind an ear will open up the perimeter, generally makes the face look wider and more angular. Something I always look out for, this is my personal pet peeve, is in the perimeter, is this little area here where the hair meets the neck around the collarbone area. You want to try and keep that area nice and clean and controlled. It makes your work look more refined, more intentional, and more professional and high-end. The third aspect that the camera sees is texture, and by texture I don't mean curl. What I'm talking about is the finish of the hair itself. So things like sleek, smooth, shiny, or chunky, gritty, piecey, or dusty, wispy, flyaway, etc. So whatever texture you create is going to help drive the storyline or the narrative, the character in the image. For example, if you think of a windswept global traveler, their hair would be dusty and romantic and flyaway. Or if you think of someone, like a beachy kind of vibe, someone who's in and out of the ocean, their hair would be chunky and piecey and gritty, right? So to summarize, there are 3 things for you to think about: perimeter, silhouette, and texture. And by combining the appropriate texture with the right silhouette, you can evoke a certain character and help tell a story visually. And whatever the shape and texture, by manipulating the perimeter, you'll be able to make the person look their best. Secret number 4, how to create energy and dynamic movement in a hair shot. I just want to do a real quick check-in with you here. If you're learning something already, or if you've learned something already, do me a favor, just drop a little Y in the comments to let me know that you're still here, and then you're getting some value out of this training so far. Thank you. Now, often the images that make you stop scrolling for a longer look have something dynamic going on, and there's 3 ways that you can do that with hair. Number 1 is wind. So you can use wind machines, which come in various shapes and sizes. Like you've got the big studio machines, you've got little portable fans, you've got small handheld machines like the Makita leaf blower that I keep in my kit, which is awesome because it has, it's mobile, it's got variable speeds, and you can be super controlled and directional with it. You can use a blow dryer, although the wind is often harder to control because with a blow dryer, the wind is designed to come out in a vortex, so it's a little bit harder to control where it's going and what it's doing to the hair. You can also use a wafting board, basically any flat object like a piece of card, or even like a food tray you can use to waft wind at the talent's hair. In fact, one time on a shoot in Tokyo, we didn't have any wind, and so I sent my assistant to Macca's to borrow a tray for us to use to waft the hair, which was awesome. With a wafting board, you will have a little less control, but it does give you this cool, exciting moment. The second way of doing it is with wire, and not by sticking wire into the hair. We use wire if you want to create a major swoosh moment, like where the hair looks like it's flying. So when we're doing things like hair campaigns or hair commercials, and we want the hair to be really shiny and reflective and luxurious, but we want it to defy gravity, and it's a scenario where if we use wind, it kind of messes up the texture. What I do is use an old wire coat hanger, loop it under the hair, make sure the hair is nicely brushed, and then we do a little countdown, 1, 2, 3, flick, and the photographer tries to snap that perfect moment as the hair flicks. It's when you, the photographer, and the model all have to work in harmony. Number 3 is through hair moves. So this is where you get your talent to do certain moves with their head or body to create different movements in the hair. They can do things like shift their weight from foot to foot to create like a swing in the hair, or they can turn their head from side to side to get a bit more of a flick, or they can jump, which gives little pops and extra volume in the hair. The side-to-side head flick is awesome when you're shooting a sharp bob because it just creates this really cool graphic line in the baseline of the hair that the camera catches. Now we're on to secret number 5, which is money shots and marketing riz. So in the editorial world, some images you will get paid for doing the hair for, and some you will basically work on for free for personal marketing and connections. Some images are all about the hair and makeup, and so for some it's like not even a consideration, it's not that important. Some shoots will have external factors that can have a big impact on your work and on your results, and others it's going to be much easier for you to control the outcome. So understanding the different types of images that you're working on not only makes you better at doing hair, it also helps you with the business side of things, because you'll be able to strategize or prioritize the sort of work you want to do, who you want to work with, so you can either make more money or kind of build your profile and generate more buzz. So the main things that you need to think about are the difference between editorial and advertising images, beauty and fashion images, studio and location shoots, and images that have been either artificially lit or have been shot with available light. Now, advertising images are commissioned and paid for by a brand to promote their brand and or products. And usually a creative agency or a marketing department, the marketing department of the brand will put together the whole shoot, the concept, the idea and everything. They reach out, they hire a team to execute their vision, they pay full commercial rates, and you go along and be part of the shoot. Now, brands sometimes shoot several times a year, depending on how often they release new products or collections. And you will see their images, those images in magazines, on billboards and other advertising and promotional materials, usually with the brand logo clearly visible. Now, the main difference between advertising and editorial is that you get paid full commercial rates for advertising, and you usually don't get any credits in the pictures. And for editorial, you get paid editorial rates, which are generally very low, but you do get credits, mentions, and you get to share them in your portfolio to promote your creativity and to build your profile and your brand. Now, editorials are put together by the editorial team at the publication. They're usually published on pages that are paid for or supported by the publication or the media outlet itself. Whereas with the advertising images, the advertisers buy the page space. They create the artwork that is placed on it and submit it to the magazine. There's often a little bit of confusion around this idea of this kind of middle ground, which is called paid or sponsored editorial. It used to be called advertorial, and it's basically advertising that looks like editorial. Your editorial team on an editorial shoot is usually pulled together as creative collaborators to work on the project. The team often gets to have a lot more creative expression. And also when you're shooting, the images will often contain multiple brands within the singular image. With editorial, you do expect to be credited and tagged when the images are published and shared. And with advertising, of course, you make more money, but you're not usually credited. And like, to be honest with you, a lot of the money jobs we do don't really put them on social media or in our portfolios because, well, A, they're often quite commercial, and B, you know, they might not be the best representation of your artistry because of the brief. And like, you might want to work for multiple different brands who are all maybe competitive with each other, and you don't want to kind of cause any conflict, I suppose. Now, both editorial images and advertising images could be beauty or fashion. The difference is basically in the composition of the shot. So fashion images are shot wider. They're sort of anywhere from the waist out, and they capture the whole look. They could even have multiple talent in one shot, and the talent could even be quite small in the shot. Whereas beauty images tend to be cropped in much tighter, like from the shoulders up, and they tend to be all about the talent's face, their head, their hair, and they usually are focused on, either one or multiple aspects of hair, makeup, skincare, eyewear, headwear, jewelry, accessories, etc. So, to put it simply, advertising equals money, editorial equals marketing, fashion shots are wider and beauty shots are tighter. Now, there's studio or location. And the main thing for us to think about is the environmental factors on location when it comes to the hair. For example, is there going to be electricity? Is there going to be shelter? What's the wind doing? Is the sun going to be coming from a certain angle, which is going to affect the way we prep the hair to get the right texture on camera? How many times is this person that we're shooting going to be getting changed? And how far from the location is the spot that we're shooting from where they're changing? Whereas compared to location in the studio, you do have a nice controlled environment without any of those external factors to worry about. You just might need to conjure up some wind, using one of those methods we talked about in secret number 4. And finally, there's the lighting. Training your eye to see if a picture has been lit or if it was shot with natural or available light helps you to get better at identifying the different types of light that we talked about in secret 1. So you'll start noticing if the light's hard or soft, whether it's side or backlit, and how that impacts the hair and how the hair reads. Secret number 6 is the brief. Now, the question is, how do you come up with creative ideas and who decides what should be done? So to help you with that, what I want to do is share 5 types of briefs and some ways that you can interpret them to satisfy your clients, or in the case of creating award imagery, the judges. Now, the first one is the comprehensive brief, and that's where the creative director's been really thorough in briefing the entire team on the concept, including the narrative, the talent, the concept, the lighting, what message they're trying to get. They will have included some hair references or some ideas that they think fits the brief, some pictures of the talent. Basically, they're going to give you everything you need creatively to turn up and thrive. The next type of brief is a collaborative brief where a team of people, so the hair, photographer, makeup artist and stylist all get together. Everybody puts their ideas in on the table and start showing each other images and bouncing off each other, and then you eventually kind of come up with a vision or a plan for the shoot. Usually this would be for a test shoot, a commissioned editorial, or an editorial submission. Now, some of the time there are certain teams that you work with, either commercially or editorial, that because of your experience or your expertise, they might be putting together the brief for everyone else, but they might ask you to collaborate on the brief and give your input, which is also nice when that happens. The third type of brief that you might get is what I like to call off brief, or the wrong-un. It's when someone's trying to do something different with a well-known personality, and usually it's when that person has their own established and recognizable style or look, and whoever's driving the brief wants to break the mold of how they're seen. Now, sometimes you can end up with a direction here that just simply doesn't work, and usually because it's way off brief for the personality or style of the talent. To give you an example, there's a certain celebrity that I work with who's quite well known for their kind of rock and roll vibe. Their rock and roll vibe and their hair. They change their hair up all the time and they have quite strong looks. The magazine we were shooting for was a very mainstream title, and they wanted to tone down her look for the cover to make her seem more approachable and, in their words, less cool. They even asked me, can you make her hair a little bit less cool? And to be honest, even though it was probably right for the magazine and their audience, it ends up making our celebrity feel not like themselves, which ends up making it just harder to get a good shot because everybody's kind of like, something's not quite right here. Another example of this could be if you're given like a really, really strong hair reference that, either it just won't suit the talent at all because their hair is very different and won't work, or their face is very different and won't make them look good. In this scenario, you've got to figure out whether you're a hired gun. You have to know, as Kenny Rogers says, know when to hold them, know when to fold them. You've got to balance your opinion with the brief and the outcome and be as diplomatic as possible about maybe suggesting a different look that will create the same energy or feeling for that talent. And similar to the off brief, number 4 is the specific brief. So that's where someone has actually decided exactly what hair they want, and that's it. That's it. It's all been signed off, and that's the hair you've got to do. And they tell you exactly what it is. Like, they'll just show you, here's a picture of the hair, this is what you're doing. Personally, I don't love it getting that kind of brief, because there are so many variables when it comes to the hair and the talent you're working with, who, the talent might have different texture, density, curl, color, or maybe the reference image has completely different lighting to what you're working with, which changes the way the hair is going to look and feel. So, in that scenario, even if you did exactly the same hair that's in the reference picture, it'll end up looking really different on camera in your shoot anyway. So again, like Kenny Rogers said, you got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them. In that scenario, if you're a hired gun, you just do what the client wants. And the fifth brief is the unachievable brief. This is a situation where you've simply got too many looks to do, too many talent, unrealistic expectations about the hair. For example, you might have references that are pictures of custom wig work with loads of extra extensions, but there's no budget or time or assistance for the extra hair. So it can be really tricky when you get this kind of brief, and having a successful outcome in this scenario really comes down to just managing expectations and basically under-promising and hopefully over-delivering. Secret number 7 is Fashion Week, right? The 3 roles of a hair director. What I love about working backstage personally is that it gives me an opportunity to stretch myself creatively. Not just creatively, but also as a leader and as a media spokesperson. And in this secret, I wanted to break it down as 3 separate roles or responsibility for the hair director, so you know what to focus on and what skills to develop and when to flex them. So the first part is the creative, which is working with the designer and the creative director of the show to come up with the look that works best for the collection. It's on brand and on brief for the show. How I like to approach that is to ask about the background story for the collection. What was the designer referencing, or what were they influenced for? What story are they trying to tell with this collection? And try to find a way to make the hair either harmonize with that story, in other words, create a look that speaks to the story of the collection, or juxtapose, right? Or in other words, do the opposite of what seems obvious, which creates an artistic tension and interest. And it'll depend on the brand as to whether you want to harmonize or juxtapose. The second part of the role is as team leader, because on show day, when you're backstage, you have to execute that look that you've designed on dozens of different heads, and you have to do it within a set time frame. You've got to fit in with rehearsals, there's models running late from other shows, and how you get that done is with your team. And many of those team, you might not have ever worked with them before, and if you have, you might not work with them regularly, so you don't always necessarily know what their skill level is, or specifically what their technical strengths are. So as the leader, it's your job to set up the team and manage them so that they can execute the brief on time with consistency of quality and finish, and in a way that each of the team goes away feeling as if they've had an awesome experience, because they've either learned something, they've stretched themselves, or they've achieved a level of excellence that makes them feel proud of themselves and makes them want to come back again. And then the third part of the role, while you're being creative and while you're leading the team, is you have to be a media spokesperson for the fashion and beauty media on behalf of the designer, the brand, and the sponsors that you're working with. And this requires a really specific set of skills. You have to be able to talk to the camera, you've got to be clear and concise, you've got to know all your talking points and remember all your talking points, and you have to be able to do it with the right energy and smile amongst the chaos. Secret number 8 is how to choose styling products. So no matter what brand or brands you prefer, I'm going to share with you how you can get exactly the results that you want to get. In other words, how you can make the hair do what you want it to do and not what it wants to do. I suppose the best thing to do really is just to pull back and take a 30,000 foot overview of what styling products are and what they do. Put simply, styling products contain active ingredients that will change the way hair feels and responds, so you can manipulate and control how it behaves. Those active ingredients can be delivered in different types of formats. They can be in a liquid, they can be in a cream, they can be kind of a paste or gel, they could be in a foam or in a powder, and those formats will have different delivery methods, so aerosol, non-aerosol, or manual. In other words, spray, pump, or stick it in the hair with your hands. And lastly, products can be applied to the hair before heat, with heat, or after heat. So then, how do you choose? The way I like to approach it is to think like a colorist and not like a consumer. Now, if a consumer comes and asks you, what product should I use to make my hair do ABC? It's pretty simple to answer that question because that person has one head of hair, one hair type only. So you can just say, here is the right product for you. But as a professional, that question gets harder because you're working with multiple different hair types and textures. So when I say think like a colorist, what I mean is, first of all, figure out what you're starting with, what results you want to achieve, and then what formula do you need to concoct to get to that end result. Like if this person with dark hair and this person with light hair were both coming to you for a color and they had this picture of lilac hair as the result that they wanted, as a colorist, are you going to do the same formula for both of them? Probably not, right? You're going to choose a different approach to achieve the same result based on the starting point of the hair. So if you want to apply that logic when it comes to choosing styling products, how much hair have you got? How thick or coarse is it? How soft, shiny, slippery, and flexible is that hair? And then, how do you want it to feel? Do you want it to feel softer and more flexible so it bounces and swings and moves? Or do you want it to feel harder and more, effed up so it'll stay put where you put it without collapsing? Whichever way you want to go, you then choose your styling products based on what you're starting with and what you want to achieve. So rather than look at the front of the bottle to see what the brand or what the consumer-facing application of that particular product is, flip the bottle around and look at the back and read the ingredients. Understand how the active ingredients affect and change the way hair feels, and then you can apply that product in the way that you need to apply it through the hair from roots to ends in order to make the hair feel the way you want it to feel. For example, if the hair is soft and slippy and you want it to feel harder, you're going to look for products that are high in acrylates, things like methacrylate, copolymers, PVP, VA, etc. And those active ingredients are found in products like gels, volumizers, thickeners, hairsprays, and some mousses. Conversely, if you've got very porous hair that already feels a bit stiff, maybe it's been bleached, maybe it's curly, naturally porous, and you want it to feel softer, more flexible and shiny, then you're going to look for products whose main ingredients are silicates and glycerols. Basically anything that ends with C-O-N-E or cone or so. Things like silicate, silicone, and or glycerin or glycerol and glycerides. So those active ingredients are usually in products like oils, creams, leave-in conditioners, shine sprays, and some mousses. And when you're looking at the back of the bottle, the way to tell what the key active ingredients are is that they're listed in order of volume. So the first ingredient you see will be the most. The next will be the next most, and so on, all the way down to the last ingredient, which is often only there in tiny amounts. While I'm talking about that, I just wanted to make a quick note on oils, which is kind of why I think it's really important to look at ingredients. Many products today that are marketed as oils, and they'll have oil on the front of the bottle, on the main packaging, they're actually, a lot of them are mostly high quality silicones, and they will have some oil in it, but it sits further down the ingredients list. So you want to make sure that you're looking, if you want a pure oil, make sure that it is actually oil and not silicone. So secret number 8, how to choose the right products no matter what brand you use. Think like a colorist. Now, secret number 9 is my go-to editorial texture combo. Now that we talked about products in detail, I want to share with you my go-to product combo for creating that long-lasting editorial texture. And it's quick as a quick thing. Basically, it's just sea salt spray and dry shampoo. So after you've styled the hair, you've got the surface texture the way you want it, you've put a bend or a bit of shape in it, whatever it is, spray sea salt spray all the way through the hair, and while the sea salt spray is still damp before it dries off, hit it with dry shampoo all the way through, because what that does is the powder in the dry shampoo will stick to the wet sea salt spray. It adds an extra level of grittiness and grab. Then what you want to do is take a warm hairdryer on low speed, just dry the product off a little bit more quickly. Secret number 10, and in my opinion, the most important thing that you can know when it comes to creating award-winning hair and award-winning images, is the hierarchy of the image. Many of us as hairdressers, we kind of start out thinking about the hair, right? We think about, ooh, what hair should I do? What can I do? And then we'll find someone we can do that hair on who's got the right hair or whatever, and then we find someone to take pictures of that hair. Now, to be clear, I have seen that approach work on a few occasions. But I've also seen that approach very often go sideways and not get the results that people want. Because as a hairdresser, it's easy for us to focus on the hair and not realize where it actually sits in the hierarchy of image creation. So let's start with the most important thing, the most important aspect. What you are creating is a photographic image. And who creates photographs? Photographer. Photographers create photographs. In fact, the word photograph means to draw with light, which is literally what a photographer does. They draw an image with light. So photographer first. And the better the photographer, the better the result. The more beauty focused the photographer is also, the better result, because if you're shooting beauty images, you want to work with a photographer that really understands and loves beauty imagery, because there's so many nuances and subtle things about pose and light and energy and so on. Now, there is always a chance that if you've got a great photographer who shoots portraits or landscapes or architecture, they could get a nice image. But if beauty and fashion are not their wheelhouse, they may not have the eye for it. And like I said, they may not understand the kind of subtle nuance that is developed by years of shooting beauty. The second most important thing, number 2 in the hierarchy, is who you are taking an image of, your talent. Now, obviously that person, well, I say obviously, most likely they're going to have hair, they probably have makeup, and will more than likely be wearing some kind of clothing. They will be in a location or against a background, but your talent is super important. It's not just someone who has nice hair or the right hair or who's going to let you do what you want to do. They need to be photogenic. Now, when it comes to casting, I recommend that you choose your talent with your photographer, because the photographer who's shooting regularly, they just have a better eye for who's photogenic and who's going to shoot well. And some people just simply have skin and bones that the light bounces off well and works well in pictures, and some people don't, no matter how good looking they might be in the flesh or how perfect they might be for your hair. So I just, as a real high recommendation, choose your talent with your photographer. So that's secret number 10, the order of importance for award-winning images. Number 1, photographer. Number 2, talent or model. And then number 3, hair, makeup, wardrobe, concept, location, etc. Those things for me sit equally. Obviously, hair's a little bit more important. Well, I hope you got something out of that. Thanks so much for tuning in. It's been awesome having you here. Feel free to follow me on Instagram and TikTok to keep up to date on what's going on. Or if you just want to get a little honest rant about the industry from time to time. I want to wish you all the very best of luck in your career. Be confident, invest in yourselves, fake it till you make it, never ever stop learning and growing. Say yes to opportunities, even if you don't know what you're doing. Work harder than everyone else around you, and I promise you, you'll end up reaping the rewards. But yeah, that's it. I'm out. Thanks for stopping by. If you have any other questions, please let me know.